Many thanks to my guest on this episode of Words, Images, and Worlds, author C.W. Blackwell, who has engaged with me in Zoom before, right before the power dropped. So this is a talk with
Yeah,
just a minor delay, but glad to reconnect.
definitely. It's great to be here. Thanks, Jason.
Absolutely, absolutely. You're in a lovely space, and I know that we're talking about writing and the art of writing today. And I'm just going to mention a couple of titles here: "Whatever Kills the Pain," "Song of the Red Squire," "Hard Mountain
Yeah,
Clay," and yep, there it is, there it is. Beautiful covers as well.
thank you. Yeah, I've got Hard Mountain Clay here as well.
Nice.
Yeah.
Uh, so your author origins. Let's start there. What led you to the written word, and at what point did you know this was something you wanted to do?
Yeah, that's a great question. I guess two very different questions too, because I remember, probably the first story I ever wrote, I was probably 4 years old. I still have it too, if you can believe that. But I
Love that.
couldn't write. So, it was one of those things where, I dictated to my grandmother and my grandmother wrote it down. And, it was some crazy superhero story, but I still have it to this day. So I think I think you talk to a lot of writers and they've had kind of this it's been a part of them for their whole lives and I think that's certainly true with me as well. Um you know um going on, I think you go through school and you start writing and as you have certain students that might have a certain affinity for it and put in a little extra flavor to their assignments and that was kind of me. I was that kid. I didn't know if there was anything I could do with it or what I wanted to do really. But eventually I think I started getting hold of some really good books and I think my fate was sealed at that point.
And any author voices, any books along the way that have been very meaningful to you, and also loving the fact that you were collaborating with your grandmother as well. That is lovely.
Yeah, absolutely. Um, and she's still with us too. She's 87 years old, and so she remembers that day. Um, but
Awesome.
yeah, yeah. But yeah, I think growing up here in California, we get exposed to a lot of John Steinbeck pretty early on, and I think maybe that was really the first author where you get assigned things to read and you go through the assignments and you turn them in, the book reports. But I think reading Steinbeck was the first time I ever thought, oh wow, there's a lot more to this. You can do a lot more with writing than just what I had seen before. I think it was Mice and Men,
I
and
teach
that
that one. Yeah.
you do, yeah, great, and
Hmm.
and that ending isn't something that anyone really expects to see at that level, but it's so powerful and so impactful. And going on from there, I think I read a lot of poetry in college. A lot of I think Octavio Paz is one of my favorites all time.
Hmm.
And so he wrote a poem called "I Speak of the City," and I don't know if you're familiar with it, but it was the first time I think where I realized that noir specifically could have this kind of a magical realism almost feel to it, or this profound nature to it, and everyone kind of experiences crime fiction differently, and sometimes it can be fun and just entertaining, excuse me, but sometimes it can have these kind of almost, there's these deeper levels to it. And
Hmm.
I think that reading this poem by Octavio Paz had this kind of, of all the details going on in Mexico City, the very gritty sort of realism that was going on. And he could describe it just so beautifully to the point where I think, after that, I think there's kind of a before and after reading that specific poem where I thought, okay, I really love crime fiction. I want to write noir, but I want to add a little something extra to it as well. Not that noir needs anything to be added to it. It's great as it is, but I think that was just what I felt, that this deep connection with that poem specifically.
Yeah, I love noir as a genre. I love crime and mystery, and I think of Elmore Leonard and James Elroy and some of those folks.
Yeah.
But I love that. the place you go is Octavia Paz and Steinbeck. Now I'm thinking about teaching Of Mice and Men again this year, and which of your
Yes.
stories I might pair with it. So I'm curious
Oh,
about that too.
that's
Yeah,
wonderful. Oh, absolutely. Yeah.
yeah,
Bring me in on Zoom. I'd love to talk about it.
yeah, absolutely. It is a plan. It is a plan. What do you feel like draws you to crime and noir and the other genres that you play in?
I think what noir does specifically, I think really well, and it's something that, we talked about Steinbeck's, but something that Steinbeck did really well too, although he's not considered noir. But yeah, I think there are, there are definitely crime elements with stories for sure. But
Hmm.
what noir does, it really is good at the realism. And I think that realism is something that I've always really been drawn to. I also read a lot of fantasy and sci-fi and different things like that. But I think with crime fiction, I always want it to be as real as possible. And part of that, I think, maybe came on later as in my day job, I work as a crime analyst. And so, I think I get exposed to actual crime and how they happen, how they occur, how they affect victims, and how they affect everyone around. And I think that so introducing that element of realism is something that noir is really good at, and it would attracts me to noir. And I think if we go a little bit deeper, specifically, I think the idea of social realism is really important to me, where you maybe there's a crime involved, sure, but you don't just go straight to the crime. You want to talk about the overall context and what led someone to commit a crime, or how the crime impacted someone else in their family and their immediate orbit, and or how socioeconomic forces kind of like push them into this position or not. But I do like adding that other element to it, and so I think noir is pretty good at that. That's kind of like the best venue that I can see of bringing that realism, but also adding these socioeconomic factors to it as well.
I was recently teaching a fiction class and looking at really lengthy descriptive prose. And then when I thought about, prose that's very just on point, very tight, crime is one of those genres that I feel like benefits from that kind of approach and
Yeah.
really takes us down to the street level. I'm curious about someone who works in crime during the day and is a crime fighter in fiction during the evening times, I guess you could say. Is that an
Sure.
escape for you? Is that kind of a processing? Uh, is there a relationship between the two for you?
There can be, as a crime analyst, I'm more involved in the analytics, and so it's a very statistical oriented position. And
Mm.
so when you're going through large amounts of data sets, but they're all real crime incidents, right? There's kind of the writer part of you wants to, you know, instead of reducing all of these incidents into numbers, you want to go the other way and move the numbers into, this sort of florid reality of what, bringing the actual statistics to life. And these aren't just statistics, right? These are people's lives that are impacted in sometimes unimaginable ways. And so I think, yeah, to answer your question, the writing is a way of humanizing sort of the real robotic work that I do during the day.
Yeah, yeah. And research, of course, there's always a story there. There's something that you pulled out that's represented in those data sets. So that makes a lot of sense. And you also have
Yeah.
a unique insight into crime and how it works.
Yeah, yeah, and I think that's also another element of bringing that realism to my work is that I'm very just fixed on the details and specificity. I really want things to be I think if there's an element that you're reading the story and you think, oh well, that couldn't happen, right? Or maybe or maybe you know a little bit about the topic I'm talking about, and something kind of jars you out of the story, right? That's a lot of writers' worst nightmare. And so maybe I overthink it, but I do go to the ends of the earth to make sure that you're not taken out of the story because something happened that, wouldn't normally happen in a day-to-day event during committing a crime or the aftermath. So,
Yeah.
yeah.
Curious about your process. You're currently in a lovely space. Is this the kind of space that you like to write and create in, journal in, or do you find other spaces to be more helpful?
With a day job and I try to find. I wish I could say yes that there's a specific place or that I could write on my patio on a sunny day, which I do sometimes, but with time crunched as much as it is, as well, and with day job, family, wife, kids, with any kind of real attempt to, at personal health or well-being, introduced into that, there's not a lot of time for writing,
Mm,
as you well know. And so, my writing space is, wherever I've got 10 or 15 minutes to hammer out a paragraph or a couple of exchanges of dialogue. So, I usually use Google Docs, and so I can pull it up on my phone or on my laptop or on my tablet or, on my lunch break, wherever I am, if I've got a spare few minutes, I like to be able to just, log in, work on the work in progress and make some progress. It's kind of a knife fight, right? It's like you're just
mhm.
fighting for every single word and page. And I'm lucky that I've been consistent enough with it that I've been able to produce work, but it's tough.
Yeah, yeah. And what you're saying there just speaks to the life of the writer and how you do have to find those times to carve out. And I love what you're saying there about just taking a moment on Google Docs and whatever you can add, that one paragraph or one page or whatever it happens to be.
Absolutely. Yeah, absolutely. Wherever I can find the time, you'll probably see me writing or at least thinking about writing for sure.
Yeah,
Hopefully writing.
yeah. Anything in particular that you feel like is a secret ingredient of writing in general or writing crime specifically?
I think, just if there's this, I can't really speak to any kind of a secret ingredient for writing crime specifically, but really just I think paying attention, being very observant is also kind of the writer's superpower, right? And so we want to always, as being a writer, you kind of like every news story, every article, every exchange in a cafe, your writer brain starts kind of latching on to different things and building it in the background of your mind. And I think just really kind of cultivating and nurturing those observational skills is really, really important. And, and having the patience to be able to, to make those, allow those to coalesce and add them to your work and find the time to do that. So, cultivate those observational skills for sure, and and really give yourself the grace and the patience to put those words to paper. Um, you know, uh, Specifically with crime, definitely, read as much crime fiction as possible for sure. Or, if you can, and this is going the full distance, and it's not always, feasible for sure, but find yourself in some sort of employment that orbits, the crime world. Like I can't tell you how helpful it's been as a crime analyst really to put those pieces together and add those details that make it rich and believable and kind of yeah I yeah, whether it's working for a public defender or the DA's office or even just a crime reporter, if you can get close to it, I think your knowledge of crime in general and how it affects people's day-to-day life will just grow it exponentially.
Yeah, yeah. Well, and that speaks to if I'm a listener out there, a reader that enjoys the genre, That speaks to the authenticity and the level of depth that you bring to it. And thinking as maybe a reader that's less familiar with your work, if I am looking at the covers that we've been looking at in this episode and listening in on the conversation, anything that you'd like to say as far as an intro to your work, maybe kind of an elevator pitch of whatever kills the pain, or anything that you'd like to mention like that to kind of give some background.
Yeah, whatever kills the pain, came about. I've been submitting fiction short stories for, pretty seriously for the last 10 years. I would say over the last five, I've been, and I think I'm always really trying to grow and improve and get better at writing. I think the last 5 years or so, I've been in a place where I'm still always growing, but I'm very lucky to be in a place where I'm happy with what I can put down. I can think of a story, and I have a little bit of that confidence to sit down and type it out and know that it's going to have a beginning, middle, and end, and it has a somewhat of a possibility of maybe getting published. And so I really wanted to go back over not the full 10 years, but those 5 years where I've really been, kind of more happy with my own personal work, and kind of and pull out the best, at least the six best stories that or the six that are my personal favorite that have been published over the last 5 years. And then the other six, because there's 12 in this collection, I wrote very specifically, from scratch. And the reason I did that is I really wanted to have the collection to have a cohesive theme, right? Or a cohesive feeling. And as you know, sometimes an anthology, a submission call comes up and it's very specific, right? It's about, please send us a story that has to do with this, this, and this, and you have to hit all four bullet points. And that can create stories that are very different from one another. And so, for that reason, I really wanted to have six fresh stories that were written just for this collection, all with a similar kind of feeling and a vibe to it. And going back to what we were talking about before, really embracing that idea of realism, but not just realism, but a kind of a social realism that looks at the whole socioeconomic picture. And
Mhm.
I think that's what you're going to find as you go through those stories. You're going to feel like they're not very, they're not disjointed. They're intended to be in the place they are throughout the table of contents.
Nice, nice. I love
So
that
yeah.
thoughtfulness, and I'm also a fan of the short story medium. I enjoy a nice novel and full-length story from time to time, but sometimes it's nice to have a collection of sort of visits around a very similar world or very similar theme. And as a reader that also has a day job, it's nice to have those moments to carve out and get an entire piece in one sitting.
Yeah, absolutely. And that was my intention. So hopefully that came through. It's still early, but I'm getting some great feedback on the book, and really hoping that continues because I like to write another one at some point.
Yeah, yeah. That takes us to the question of what do you envision next? What are you working on now? And also, if I'm a listener out there and I do want to find out more, if I want to go and get a copy of your work, where would be the best place to do that?
Yeah, absolutely. So I finished a novel last year, or actually, I think it was the first month or two of this year. And it's called The Cold Dark Forever. It's a noir novel that's set in 1942 in the central coast of California. And it got picked up by Shotgun Honey, which is the same, if you're familiar with it, the same imprint that did Hard Mountain Clay. Ron Phillips runs Shotgun Honey. He's really great at what he does, and so that novel is going to come out with Shotgun Honey at the end of next year. So I'm really excited for that. I've written novellas and published them. I've written collections of short stories now, but I haven't yet put out a standalone novel. And so this will be the first for that. I'm really excited and hoping that it gets in as many hands as possible. So I'll be at the conferences and pushing that, and my not only Whatever Kills the Pain, but also The Cold Dark Forever when that comes out. If you want to find my stories, you can go just about, a Google search of my name and it'll come up. I think a lot of the Amazon stuff comes up first. But if you don't want to, buy from Amazon, you can always look on bookshop.org, which is a great organization that supports independent bookstores. Some stuff on Barnes and Noble for sure as well. And if you want to pick up Whatever Kills the Pain, yeah, you can do that in all those places, or you can go straight to the publisher. Rock and a Hard Place Press put this out. And if your listeners haven't had a chance to look at anything from Rock and a Hard Place Press, I would definitely encourage that. They're a great, great imprint. They have, and it's great to support indie presses, right? Because they're just putting
Mhm.
out some of the best stuff right now. They just don't have the reach and the distribution to compete with the big five or the big four now. But the Rock and Hard Place Press puts out just some great collections, anthologies. They have a quarterly magazine, and now they're starting to do these, single author collections, which is great for me. So,
Yeah,
um, but yeah, check those out. I definitely have a few stories with them.
cool. There are wonderful things happening right now in indie publishing, and The Cold Dark Forever, you said?
The Cold Dark Forever, yes.
That
So,
is a great title. That the
wow.
title alone just
Yeah.
says genre. Yeah, love that.
Thank you. And Ron Phillips, he's great with covers too. And so, I just, I can't wait to see what he comes up with with the title, with sort of the noir imagery. And I think he's going to put something together that's really great. So I'm really looking forward to that. I don't know when this will come out, but I am going to be at BoucherCon this year. So if you get a chance in New Orleans, if you get a chance to see me and stop me and say hello, I'd love to talk to you or anyone that shows up, any one of your listeners that goes. And I'm really going to try to get to Left Coast Crime in February and March of next year as well. So trying to get out there to
Awesome.
the conferences, the conventions. I like meeting other writers and readers, and so if you see me, don't be shy. Come and say hello.
Awesome, awesome. Well, many thanks, CW, and glad to have you back anytime as the novels are coming to be and short stories. And I'm guessing there will at some point be a poetry collection since Octavio Paz is one of your influences. So if not, may
You,
it be so.
if you look really hard, there is one out there. So yeah,
Oh, nice,
yeah,
nice.
I put one out a few years back called River Street Rhapsody, and it's all about sort of the folks that hang out on River Street in my town, downtown. But yeah, if you're interested, there is one out there.
Very nice, very nice. I love the range. It's been wonderful talking with you, and I'll tag you when I put this out and make sure that the link comes to you. Many, many thanks.
All right, thank you so much, Jason. I appreciate it.